And welcome to the VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Perles Plaza, Michigan State University, Spartan Stadium. Going to have another football game this weekend, Paul. American tackle football. Michigan State's 2-0. They play Youngstown State, coming in FCS team. Michigan State, still some afterglow after that big win last weekend against Boston College. Really earned it. I thought some players showed a lot of heart. We've been covering it over at SpartanMag.com. Make sure to give us a thumbs up, give us a like here on the channel, subscribe to the channel, become a SpartanMag.com subscriber. $1. Try it for a week. You'll love it. Today, John Boyer, Michigan State's quarterbacks coach, came out and talked a little bit more about Aidan Chiles and the big game Chiles had, which is getting a little bit of regional and even a little national attention. NBC national televised game. Aidan Chiles doing some big things and impressing a lot of the talking heads and pundits out there. Paul, some publicity positive for Aidan Chiles this week.
You know, you look at a guy like Urban Meyer breaking down some stuff, and I was thinking about Aidan Chiles and watching that game, rewatching it. That's kind of a game that I think Urban Meyer would like. You know, he loved his running quarterbacks, and he loved to use them on third down. I'm sure he loved that option run, or not option run, but the design quarterback run in double overtime. You know, huge play for Michigan State, but I think everybody gets put so high up on a pedestal in sports. You know, like when he was coming in, just because he had a limited amount of success, he had high recruiting ranking. Obviously, he has tons of physical ability, arm talent, but then they get knocked off that pedestal so quickly, and a lot of guys don't make a comeback from that. But I do think Aidan Chiles has done he's taken a lot of steps in his development as a quarterback. I think he's more world-wise. I think he's developed some savvy. He's experienced some of the nastiness that comes with the position, and I think he's bounced back from it. But I also think too that he's kind of grown as a football player and as a guy that knows what has to get done. You know, bringing John Boyer in was a huge part of it, and you can see those guys interacting on the sideline with the tablets. But having that guy there just to work on him and work on his craft and kind of bounce things back and forth with him, I think that's really big, because that's just there's so much going on, and for an offensive coordinator to hold the quarterback's coach job, that's fine for a guy that's like a fifth-year senior if he transfers in. But for a guy like Aidan Chiles, who has a lot of developing to do in terms of recognition of what coverages they're trying to do and how you can how you can attack those, or what you need to do at the line of scrimmage to change a play, whether it's just flipping the running back and that type of thing, or changing protections. Those are all things that it's very valuable to have a coach there, one that you trust. And John Boyer is obviously a guy that Aidan Chiles trusts, and Boyer's a guy that has a world of faith in Chiles. And it was kind of, Boyer was out there today. It was neat to hear him talk about some of the development that Chiles has made. It may be a little bit more personal terms than we heard from Jonathan Smith yesterday. Jonathan Smith was talking about the technical side of it. Boyer was kind of relating it in terms of not only a coach to a player, but also a relationship standpoint, and that was kind of neat to see.
Yeah, you mentioned changing plays and those type of things. John Boyer mentioned today that Chiles was better at that in Game 2 than he was in Game 1. And that's something you and I talked about back in the summer at the Big Ten Media Days in Las Vegas. Asked Jonathan Smith at the time about getting into the right play and those type of things. And those are things that as a player gets older, you can imagine that they will improve upon. And a lot of times the public wants players to be really good right away, and it's just not realistic for most players. In most situations, you watch what Dante Moore's doing at Oregon now. He's got to wait a couple of years, and I think the people in Ann Arbor need to learn that lesson this year too. We'll wait and see whether
it won't happen, because it's the same thing that happened with Michigan State, same thing that happened at Nebraska with Rayola. Anytime you got a young guy with a lot of hype, the buzz is going to be sky high, because you assume, he's got better physical talent than the guy that he's replacing. That may well be true, but the mental side of the game is such a big deal. And I think the last game was interesting because, it was Chiles. It's not him playing against Dylan Lonergan, but those are two different style of quarterbacks. Lonergan's a guy that, got rid of the ball really quickly, identified things, processed things really quickly. A Kirk Cousins kind of guy. And then you saw what Chiles did. You saw some development in the mental side of it, but those physical tools, those physical attributes, some of the throws that he can make, but also what he can do with his feet. It's a completely different dynamic. And if he can get better and better at that mental side of it, then it's going to be really special.
What did you think about what we talked about today with Krishan McCray coming out, slot receiver? Connor Moore came out as well, some other players, Alante Brown, and how comfortable Alante is with his role and the way he's impressed his teammates. What are your thoughts about what we learned today with interviews?
Well, I thought the thing that from both Lante Brown and Krishan McCray, you look at Lante Brown's a guy that's played a lot of football, was a starter, is not anymore. He's accepted his role. I don't know how comfortable he is with that, because any guy that he said that he sees himself as a receiver first, and that may well be true, but he's accepted the role he has. Krishan McCray is a guy that put up a ton of yards at Kent State for a team that didn't do anything, that didn't go anywhere. He was getting stats for himself, and there's nothing wrong with that. He played as a team player, but in this environment, each of those guys have to accept their role, and I think you're seeing that across the board with the offensive linemen. You've got 9 guys rotating in there. I think there's some advantage to it long term, but not in the short term. And I think those guys, if you really pin them down off camera, they would say, yeah, that's true. But I think the mindset of this team overall is that these guys are going to accept their roles, play for their teammates, and I think you got the feel around the whole program, defense and offense, is that you got more guys playing for each other in this moment. Maybe that'll change in the offseason when guys hit the transfer portal or not. But for right now, everyone's bought in, and I don't think you can kind of become a winning program or get to that development stage where you need to get for Michigan State, go from last year to something better if you don't have that buy-in. And it seems like there's a lot of buy-in. Krishan McCray, there's a lot of room for growth there. I think that slot receiver position, that's the next manifestation of this offense where they can really take the next step in terms of getting more explosives. As people key in on Omari Kelly, as they key in on Nick Marsh, as people focus on the run game, that slot receiver position, that's going to be, there's some big plays to be had there. Some big plays that were probably missed in the last game. But for right now, he's biding his time, doing his job, playing hard, and not complaining. He had that big one-handed catch, but I'm sure he wants to have a 70-yard touchdown. And I think there's a lot of guys biding their time, willing to take advantage of the roles that they have, and working to be ready to do more if they're called upon to do so.
And we haven't seen Rodney Bullard yet, but as a slot receiver, he's explosive also. McCray and Bullard gives them some explosiveness there. We might see Bullard maybe do some things this weekend against Youngstown State. Krishan McCray mentioned today that one-handed catch that he made is something they practice every day. I've not seen them do that. And I thought that was interesting. Apparently they practice one-handed catches, and he said Chiles put that ball exactly where it needed to be because there was a lot of traffic there. You might think if somebody makes a high catch like that, it was inaccurate, but no, he put it right where he could go up and get it. So that was just talent there and preparation. That was a nice play, and Michigan State continues to add players as the season goes along that become more and more threats as the season progresses as well. But Paul, I want to tell you, as you know, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% to 73% in recent years. That's not good, Paul. Michiganders are squandering $105 million, American dollars, per year by not taking back their bottles and cans. That's hurting the environment, people. So help the environment, help yourself, help your roads. They're your roads, your beaches, and it's your dime. So go back, take them back. That's a message from our friends at Spartan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to your Michigan State Spartans. Spartan, thank you for that. And Paul, game against Youngstown State. Now, what's interesting here is Michigan State coming off a big win, some dings and bumps and bruises. Like Smith said yesterday, like mid-season. They're not in mid-season, but it's almost like mid-season bumps and bruises. You saw Malik Spencer come out early. Jordan Hall came out early. They finished the game, showed a lot of heart. Aidan Chiles has gotten a little dinged up in both games. If you're Michigan State, you want to get a win, obviously. You want to do it in an impressive fashion and get more players into the game. If I'm Michigan State, I look for a chance to win this game, maybe without Malik Spencer. I know coaches might say, screw that, we got to get a win no matter what. You respect all opponents. But Malik Spencer is dinged up. You saw when he's not on the field that it did have an impact. If you get a chance to rep a defensive backfield with Smith and Denson or, Cromwell and Smith, it helps your depth and everyone knows Michigan State has good potential depth and ability in terms of depth, but in terms of gelling together, they were not gelled in some regards. Smith talked about some drops that were too deep and some were too shallow, and communication, co-signing off on plays led to a couple touchdowns. Not only can you give Spencer a rest, but you can strengthen those emergency situations a little bit better for later in the season. I don't know if they're doing that. Nick Saban used to say you can never coach a game worried about injuries or fearful of them. But I look at it as an opportunity to maybe sit Spencer and get stronger in the defensive backfield. And Jonathan Smith said when Nakai Martinez is ready, he's going to go back on the field. So maybe you get him, if he's cleared, maybe he gets a couple of reps just to get some of the rust off. But Michigan State should be able to handle this opponent, Paul, I would imagine. You're seeing a lot of blowouts around the country, more so than usual. Not only MAC teams getting blown out, but FCS teams really getting destroyed in some of these games this year, more so than in past years, in my opinion. I don't know if you'd agree with that. I don't expect this to be as competitive as Youngstown State was a few years ago, or Furman, or Jacksonville State. Sometimes in the last 15 years when Michigan State's gotten into competitive games against teams at this level. I've not watched Youngstown State yet. I got full respect for that program. The Penguins, what they did with Tressel was there. I loved those teams back then. But so maybe when I watch some of them, I might change my tune. But right now, from a Tuesday point of view, I'm thinking it's a chance to maybe get some other guys in and establish that playing group even more so, and maybe keep some guys a little bit fresh. Am I wrong about that?
Maybe
the coaches would probably disagree.
You might be wrong. You might be right. I mean, there's a cost benefit thing for me, because Nakai Martinez has been out for a while, right? He hasn't. And Malik Spencer is out for a long time. Those guys haven't been on the field together.
Correct.
And I do think there is a benefit of those guys playing. You want to get some reps to those guys on the field together, because they haven't played in training camp together.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of injuries. You would think of a guy like Chance Rucker. He hasn't played with a lot of these guys in a game type setting. And with Michigan State getting to the point where after this game they go into conference play, I know Martinez and Spencer played a lot of football together. I know they're veterans. But you want to have a little bit of on-field chemistry.
That's a great point.
Whereas I wouldn't play him 50 snaps on defense, I wouldn't mind seeing those guys out there together operating. And one of the reasons I'd like to see those guys out there, if they're both available, if Spencer's relatively healthy, is I think Michigan State, before you can blow those guys out, you got to stop them a little bit. And that quarterback is a little bit of a problem.
Good point. Also.
I don't know what point in the second quarter they pulled him from the game, but if they had kept him in the game, he would have set the FCS record for rushing yardage in a single game by a quarterback. I think he finished with 264 rushing yards against Robert Morris, which is not a terrible FCS.
Robert Morris is just one guy. How's he playing defense? Or am I wrong about that? It's a football team.
The collector, Robert Morris.
Oh, the university. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and but it's 264 yards at one point in that game, like with 9 minutes to go in the second quarter. He had 233 yards rushing. He was averaging 39.4 yards a carry. Now that's not superhuman effort. That's terrible defense as well. I get that, but I think Michigan State needs to clamp down on those guys early, establish that run defense, and then. I'm with you. I think they've rotated enough guys through. 30 guys have played on defense regularly in each of these last two games, and I think there's no reason for that not to continue. And also give guys like Denson reps, because and Aidan West and guys like that really can benefit. I mean, there's a lot of guys that can benefit from this. Malik Spencer, Nakai Martinez, they could benefit from playing a dozen reps together, 20 reps together. They can get some on-field chemistry, and they can build it the next week in practice. But for those young guys, games like this are invaluable, and that's why we've seen over the years a lot of guys that you think might be able to contribute as true freshmen or second-year players. They get a lot of reps in this. So for guys like Jaden Savory, maybe he gets more reps in this. Maybe a guy like Brennan Parachek, you use him, to see if he can get some rust knocked off. But there's a lot of different guys, young guys on this team that can benefit, across the board on both sides of the ball.
I like your plan better. You've convinced me. Speaking of Jaden Savory, had a nice high catch that I don't know if any other receiver on the team, maybe Marsh, would have the catch radius to go up and get that catch on the third or fourth play of the game, opening drive, touchdown drive. I thought it was interesting yesterday when Jonathan Smith said that with Savory that they had other packages, and it was just that was a package that they called for. I'm not sure that was scripted for that package to go on the field at that point, but that's why he was on the field early. We've seen that last year with Mekhi Frazier and Tullis surprisingly getting on the field early in competitive games. And that was the case here. But Savory, we saw him in high school, all kinds of ability, excellent youth basketball player, grassroots player. Early on, we saw some of that talent. And a guy that exudes talent and a high ceiling, literally went up for a high ceiling to make that catch. You're seeing that with Aidan West and some other guys. So it's kind of interesting to see some of these freshmen coming along, young players in the program getting a shot. and flashing some athletic ability on this roster, Paul.
I think they're using they've done a nice job with tight ends going back to Oregon State, and they've had consistently, if they've had guys that they felt had really long-term value, guys like Jack Felling or some of their other NFL guys, they got those guys on the field as freshmen, gave them a smattering of plays that they can do where they can excel, and we're seeing the same thing with Jaden Savory. So not only is it a chance for him to get experience as a true freshman, but it's also indication that they feel he has legitimate, serious long-term value in this program, and he is in some ways a rare talent. Now, if they can get to the point, especially when you consider how little football he's played. So for him to get to the point where he's got a semi-functionality as a blocker, I'm assuming, because they're not going to put him on if he can't do stuff, but that they can get this out of him at this age, given how little football he's played, is very, very impressive to me, and it speaks to his long-term value. But he's an impact player. It's rare. It's rare to get tight ends that can really kind of field stretching tight ends, and I can think of a handful over the years. And even really good tight ends. There's been times that guys like a Josiah Price when he was here caught a lot of touchdowns, but there's some elements where he didn't have the explosive athleticism downfield. So Savory's a guy that's really intriguing, and it's been a while since Michigan State had a really elite athlete type tight end, and I'm excited to see how he develops, because he's doing everything he needs to do, and they've got a plan for him, and he's following that roadmap.
Is it my imagination, or is Jonathan Smith getting more and more comfortable here? I thought he was excellent in the press conference yesterday, talking about strengths and weaknesses, corrections. I thought he's been excellent on his radio show. I thought, even just something as some people would say is meaningless as leading the team out of the tunnel, and he said, well, I didn't lead them out, I was off to the side. And that was the case in the opener against Western Michigan also. He was off to the side. It's not something he wants to do, not that's maybe something it's not something he naturally or be comfortable doing, but he's doing it because I think he gained a sense that that's kind of what he figured out that around here it's kind of expected, because he's been asked about it a little bit. He's going to do what people expect to an extent. I would imagine. I don't want to speak for him, but even on the sideline, just getting a little bit more. What would be the word? He's more. Like after Alante Brown had that long touchdown, or it wasn't a touchdown, but the long kickoff return, Michigan State scored 3 or 4 plays later. He went over, shook his hand, put his arm around him, said something to him. Obviously, Alante Brown set up that drive, but just a little bit more engagement maybe. And not for show, but I'm just wondering, are you sensing that he's getting more and more popular? Also, the recruiting thing, it's got more of a natural flow to it also.
I don't think he's more popular. I just think these are his
comfortable.
They are. He is more comfortable because last year, half of those guys weren't his guys. Uh-huh. There were a lot of holes in the roster, you didn't have answers for, and there's a lot of things to worry about, more brush fires to put out. If you look at how they remade the roster in the offseason, kept guys in the program that were OKGs, not always in starting positions, but you look at Alante Brown being one of those guys. That's a guy that they could have pushed out of the program. They didn't. They wanted him back. Sam Edwards, another guy. So they've identified which guys on their team can help them from a leadership standpoint and from a football standpoint. And I think he's comfortable because he's got guys that he's willing to ride with and feel comfortable. And they're not just stand-ins or placeholders or guys that he wouldn't have recruited. These are guys that were purposely brought into the program, guys that fit their mindset. And I think, there's a comfort level, but if they had lost that game by 2 points in overtime, you would have seen the same anxiety and angst that we saw a lot of times last year, because he doesn't like to lose. And as a coach, you want answers, and last year there just weren't a lot of answers. You could say, well, this didn't work, so we could try this, but at some point you got to look at they didn't have the personnel, and and the offensive line too. If you look, he's an offensive coach. He wants to run his offense, and his offense doesn't work unless you can run the football. So I can see him being a lot more comfortable because they've been able to run the football effectively while rotating a lot of offensive linemen, and that kind of opens up a lot of other stuff. So, there's a lot more reason to be comfortable. And, I do think it also helps to have more assistant coaches. It helps, that he can have someone with Aidan Chiles. It helps that you've got more paid assistant coaches. And, it's more like a pro type deal. And there's a lot more eyes on this program. And I think there's a lot more trust. It's a year 2. You trust your guys. You've been with them for a year. You know how they handle adversity. And I think that's where the confidence comes from.
I think he's just kind of loosening up a little bit. And I think he likes these guys. And from day one, he's always talked about the importance of having the players know each other to get the entire team collective. Last year, they attempted to do that. They spent a lot of time on it. They got into the season, lost a few games, and that became fractured a little bit. Shouldn't surprise anybody with the number of new players they had on the roster, new coach, all those things. Had to do it again, another semi-roster flip. But as Nick Saban used to say, you throw a lot of mud on the wall, more's going to stick each time, as they've worked to get these players to know one another, which Smith thought was step one toward having a team that's going to care about one another. And when you get in a tight game, they'll play for one another. I think we saw a lot of that yesterday. They're playing for themselves, they're playing for one another, the team, and so forth. But I was impressed with Aidan Chiles' heart, Malik Spencer's heart, Jordan Hall's heart. A lot of guys just grinding to get that win on Saturday, and that little element might have made some of that difference. Talk about cultivating a culture, step by step, little by little. That's going on here. I think that these players do care about one each other. It's hard to do that when you've got 41 new guys. They're not all going to know each other real well. But I'm not seeing a lot of Cadillacing going around. To use a term where, where guys might think mostly about themselves. Everybody's going to think a lot about themselves. Obviously, it's the human condition. But in this day and age of the transfer portal and the transient nature of college football, the teams that can have a team element are going to help get that extra edge that you need in so many of these close games. And a couple of years ago, say what you want about Michigan, but Harbaugh somehow with his voodoo magic was able to get that team, a very talented team, to perform and think as a team and feel as a team. And that's going to be an important secret sauce for coaches around the country, and it's a high priority for Jonathan Smith. We'll see long-term how it turns out, but I kind of see some traction there, and it has an impact on the field.
It should come as no surprise when you look at what Michigan State was able to do in the basketball realm last year with not having spent near as much NIL money as teams like UCLA, Indiana,
Illinois.
Even like Washington. They blew a lot of money. Michigan State was able to win that conference because, in a lot of ways, they were connected. And you hear coaches talk about this over and over and over again. Every press conference, like before the season started, they talk about, well, I have a good feeling about this team because they're connected. But that's been a focal point throughout the coaching profession in all sports throughout this recently in the transfer portal era is, yeah, you've got to bring in players, but it's how you merge them and how you connect them with your team and how they fit together that's going to make the difference on whether this mercenary landscape works. And I do feel, going back to the interviews today with guys like Caleb Carter, guys like Kershawn McCray, Alante Brown, that there is an acceptance and a focus on team goals that I think a lot of these guys are. Yeah, would Alante Brown like to be a starting wide receiver? No question. But there is a feel within the program that these guys have a chance to play something bigger than themselves. And for a guy like Omari Kelly, who started out at a Power 4 school at Auburn, went to Middle Tennessee State, now he's back. He could appreciate those type of things, appreciate the team goals, appreciate, even Tao Tolliver. You saw him in the stands, like after the game, like up with Michigan State fans. You saw him basking in that. Is that a guy that wishes he was probably carrying the ball more? Probably. Did he come from from Sacramento State to carry the ball 5 times a game? Probably not, but you can see them relishing the moment, and I think that shows in team chemistry, and I think it's a good thing. It's a good sign.
And watching Jonathan Smith, a lot of times these videos that are released by the university, you also get a little more of a window into his personality and the way he engages with his players and connects with them. When he announced who the captains were, just his delivery. It's not pots and pans and fire and brimstone, but it's genuine. It comes off as genuine to me. But the players and the way they react to his announcement of captains and the way he announced the players of the week this week, Alante Brown and Konyndyk and Jordan Hall and Aidan Chiles, it's not for show, but you gain a sense for his delivery to the team, not wasting a lot of minutes, not wasting a lot of time, but there is a certain personality that he has that you can see when the players talk about how much they like him. I'm not sure that was always apparent to the public because those windows weren't really open to the public, but I think it's genuine when these players talk about what they think of him and why the recruits come here and why they enjoy playing for him. I think that's apparent in some of those videos, and we'll probably see more of those as the season goes along. And it's a lot more joyful when you're winning games. And right now they've got something going. They're happy to be around one another, fully expecting to be 3-0 after this weekend. It's going to be better weather this weekend. It's Michigan State football. It's interesting again, Paul. It's interesting.
It's fun, man. And that game, like I was talking to Jason Killip, our very good recruiting reporter, but it's different because it hasn't been a lot of instances like in recent years, like where you can go back and you can ask recruits, like, hey, how did it feel to be in that stadium? And there, it felt like consistently over the years. When D'Antonio was here, there was always games like that, where there was emotional games where, people kind of came together and it was like, to use a cliche, a program win, which last weekend was most definitely, I think, a program win for a program trying to build. But it's a good energy. And, and I think there's a willfulness not to celebrate a win over a quality opponent, but, an excitement that they rose to the occasion, overcame some difficult situations, and have room to get better and want to get better. And I think, these guys don't think they've arrived. They want to get better, and I think you'll see them continue to push in that direction.
After the game in the VCast, I said I wasn't sure how much those second-string offensive linemen got on the field after that second or third drive of the game. I was wrong. Went back and watched it again. They were on the field quite a bit. I didn't realize they started the second half, and I apologize to the viewers on that. I'm Mr. Magoo up there sometimes in the press box. We're keeping track of a lot of things and be able to read numbers way up there above the back row of the back row. If you've ever sat in the top row of the upper deck at Spartan Stadium, you know how far that is. We're another 30 feet higher than that, and it's difficult for an old guy like me to see who's on the field while taking notes on other stuff. I didn't realize that Brocious, Vincic, and Lepo started the second half. Huge drive, down by 7 points. Really need to make something happen in that opening drive, and key play was that 3rd and 6 deep back shoulder fade to Amari Kelly going up and making that play. He was covered, and Chiles has got to make a play, and trusted his receiver. You can tell they've done that in practice before, but on the same page with a first-year player, made that one happen. That was a 5-man rush. That was a blitz. Ashton Lepo did a good job. Protection against 17. Hutchins on that play, who's a decent pass rusher. And Mekhi Frazier, running back, picks up a blitzing linebacker, cuts him down. So pass protection was good in that one. Chiles trusted it. 3rd and 6, turning point play in the game. Very next play, I formation. Got to honor the run. Safety comes up. Safety takes the fullback. 2-man route. Nick Marsh, touchdown. Those 2 plays changed that game. I didn't know that second-string offensive line, 3 second-stringers on the field for that one, Paul. I missed the memo on that.
What interested me about that is that John Boyer was saying that that's the same play that Chiles threw earlier in the game against a similar defense where that went for an incompletion. And, they talked about that play on the sideline, went over it on the iPad, and, he put it in the spot where it had to be instead of the spot where it was prior in the previous instance of manifestation of that play. So I think that's cool. That shows growth right there. That you can make adjustments in game, and that was a heck of a pass, but a heck of a play. And it really reminded me of some of those high point type plays, high level plays between quarterbacks, NFL quarterbacks and receivers during the D'Antonio era when. Whether it's a guy like B.J. Cunningham or,
even R.J. Shelton with Connor Cook a few times.
Like just guys that came up and made big plays, Keyshawn Martin. There are plays like that change the course of a game. And if you have a quarterback that can throw that ball, not an easy ball to throw under those circumstances, but you have a receiver that can go up and make a play. We always talk about, where a quarterback didn't put the ball. But so often these games come down to instances where your skill players make plays for you, where it doesn't have to be perfect or it's not in the ideal location, but they go and make a play. We saw that from Krishan McCray with a one-handed catch. We saw from Jaden Savory. Michigan State has simply more guys that can go up and make winning plays when they have to, 50-50 type balls. And, it helps when a quarterback doesn't have to be perfect because it's not easy to be perfect under duress, and gives you offense a lot of confidence. Like Chiles did a really good job in this game of not really putting himself in dangerous situations. And that's completely different than what we saw last year against Boston College when he threw 3 picks. There was a lot of ill-advised passes, him trying to make plays that weren't there. In this game, he trusted skill players to make plays. He made plays with his legs, but he really didn't hang anyone out there really in a dangerous situation, and I think that shows growth and maturity in his game where he's gotten to the point where he can make plays for his team, carry his team, without doing something stupid. We saw more checkdowns in this game, and and I think that was, that's development as a quarterback, but also confidence in the whole overall skill set around him.
I wouldn't use the word stupid. I'd say dangerous or reckless. I mean, he's a bright
Ill-advised.
kid.
That's what I mean by, like
he's a bright kid. He's coachable. He's making progress.
No, but there are times where very smart people make boneheaded plays. Like especially guys that are competitors. You look back to Kirk Cousins when he was here, Connor Cook. A lot of those. There is an edge that you have to have. There's that line that you have to have as a quarterback, and to be a good quarterback, you can't be afraid to make mistakes. You have to take risks. But I thought Aidan Chiles did a really nice job of taking manageable risks. He didn't take ill-advised risks that are going to put his team in a really bad situation, and that shows real growth from him.
He avoided turnovers, and that's been a big area of emphasis all offseason coming into the year, and he held true to that in tight situations. And now you can still push that a little bit more now because he took a couple sacks. Some they were just right on him right immediately, but there's another next level there to be able to do it even quicker as he continues to progress and develop. And it's a lot of fun to watch him. He showed a lot of heart. Football is an entertainment business, and Michigan State fans were certainly entertained by number 2 on Saturday. And when people may have seen the video where he went and grabbed the little kid after the game. That was John Boyer, his son. John Boyer, the quarterback's coach. That gives you another window into Chiles and his development and how much this is a family enterprise because he's around these coaches so much. And Jonathan Smith allows 4 coaches' kids to come around a little bit, I think during the summer around lunchtime a little bit here and there. So the players get to know the children of the coaches, and that was genuine. That's pretty cool. In my opinion, I'm sure you probably agree. Yeah,
as a dad, I mean, what cooler moment. And, this is a very high-pressure business, but relationships are the foundation of trust in sports and in life. And the whole family aspect, you talk about being connected. And, I think that was one of the skills that D'Antonio had. That it was a family-run program. And some people look down at that and say, well, that's not, you're too loyal or whatnot. But, it matters in a day and age where it's a mercenary world when coaches, can shuttle you out the door as fast as you can run out the door. To have that trust, to have that kind of relationship, that's really important. And I think it was a really neat moment, and it says a lot about the program. I thought it was interesting today. One of the most interesting things that Alante Brown said today, because he was recruited by D'Antonio, he was in that 2019 recruiting class. He talked about the similarities between Mark D'Antonio's program that he experienced and Jonathan Smith's program. Both of them are family-run programs, and it's not fake; it's real. And I think there's, that's what you want. If I'm a Michigan State fan, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that in this mercenary world, which we all complain about, that there's something bigger than just roster cuts.
Yeah, and a lot of these players that were players for the previous regime. One of the first things that they noticed that was different was the head coach left his door open. Yeah. I think it was Cal Halliday said, "I didn't even." You can go in and you can talk to him, which was, I think some of those guys found it refreshing. Alante Brown came in, committed to Tucker, but was recruited by D'Antonio as a quarterback at Chicago Simeon years ago, goes to Nebraska, transfers here. So he's seen 3 different heads of the program here, didn't sign with D'Antonio, but was recruited by him, and still sees D'Antonio around town now, around the campus, around the football facility, and enjoys doing that. So there's a lot of indications, Paul, that this is still college football for some people to an extent.
Yeah.
And it's been fun to watch.
It's refreshing, man. It's just like going back to the basketball thing last year. Covering the Michigan State basketball team was refreshing in a lot of ways because those guys played for each other, and it was bigger than just them. What their point total is going to be. Those guys had goals, and they followed them. And I'm not saying that this team is as connected as that. I think it's easier to get really close as a team when you play basketball because there's not as many guys on the roster. They had that trip to Spain where everyone got close. They had a lot of good kids that brought that team together. But you can feel it when you, as a reporter, when you're in a room and when guys are like mercenary or when guys are, teammates. And there's a lot of teammates in this thing. You can see it when guys are up at the podium for interviews. Their buddies are coming by and walking by, and they make a goofy face or make sure that they acknowledge whoever's being interviewed. The person being interviewed acknowledges whoever's off camera. There's a lot of indications that these guys like each other and they care about each other. It's more, and I do think it's more, for me, it's more rewarding to cover, but I do think it gives you a chance to win close games.
Yeah, we'll see how it carries over on the field. It might be a little bit, and there's going to be a lot of close games coming up in the schedule at Nebraska, at Minnesota, at USC, at Iowa, at Indiana. tough ones. None of those teams are juggernauts. And Michigan State, I think, is in a position to steal one or two of those, which can have an impact on that win-loss record. Could be better than people thought, including myself a month ago. We'll see how it plays out. Anything else, Paul? For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from Perles Plaza on the campus of Michigan State University with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.